Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And we have just had the second weekend of the EPCR competitions, the Champions Cup, as well as the Challenge Cup. And at the moment, there is a lot of concern growing at Loftus Stadium with the Bulls suffering back-to-back defeats in the Champions Cup, where they've just not pitched up, to be honest, and are in a really, really bad space. And a lot of Bulls fans are sort of freaking out. So I thought we'd have a little look at the season so far from the Bulls and kind of what they need to do to be able to turn this season around, because we're talking about a side that has perennially underperformed the last few years with regards to delivering trophies. The fact is that the Stormers have won a URC, the Sharks have won a Challenge Cup. Now, yes, the Bulls have not really been in the Challenge Cup, they've been in the Champions Cup. However, they have reached finals in the URC. I think they've had a good enough squad to go further in the Champions Cup than they have, but they've just not quite gotten there. And now, under a new sort of tenure, under a new coach, and Johan Ackermann, people are hoping that we're going to see a different type of Bulls side. And unfortunately, at the moment, we are, but not in a good way, because the Bulls at the moment just look very, very beatable. And I mean, you look at that result against the Lions. I mean, look, the Lions played well, but if the Bulls hadn't scored those two sort of tries at the end, it would have been about a 20-point loss against the Lions side, which had lost to Zebra a few weeks ago, and are also not in the best of spaces, and definitely on paper not as strong as the Bulls themselves. So if you're a Bulls fan, where are you at the moment? What are you thinking? And, what needs to change at the Bulls to start getting the results? Because, these are them. Let's call it a spade. These are them. So if we go back all the way to the last game of last season, that was when Leinster beat them in the final, 32 points to 7, completely outclassed. That was the final game from Jake White's point of view. They did look to change. And I think the main thing, they didn't say it was a coaching issue. They said it was just the relationship had broken down between Jake White and his assistants and the players. And there was just no sort of synergy within the squad itself. Now, they brought in Johan Ackermann, who is a phenomenal man manager. That's where I think his point of difference really is. Now, initially, there was a concern about the fact that he's coming into the environment and not bringing anybody. He's not getting his, the backroom staff that he would like. You think about the partnership there with the Swayze to Brain, obviously not available. But he's basically sort of just come into an existing ecosystem of players, of coaches, and there haven't been a lot of structural changes apart from the head coach. And a lot of people are talking about the fact that there are bigger issues than just, for example, what Jake White was doing at the Bulls. And that's kind of one of the big problems. So if we look at the results there from Johan Ackermann, it started with a 53 points to 40 victory over Ospreys at home. Now, this is kind of to be expected. Your first game under a new coach was always going to be maybe a little bit poor from a defensive point of view. They were scoring lots of tries, though, and they scored lots of tries a week later against Leinster as well and beat Leinster 39 points to 31. So you're now looking at those first two games saying, right, well, the positives are we're scoring points, but we're also conceding a lot of points. Then the problems start to really, really develop, because after that, they have basically been nowhere. They got hammered by Ulster away, 28 points to 7. They came up short against Connacht, which was probably a side that they would have liked to have beaten and think they should be beaten. And they got outplayed by Glasgow Warriors, 21 points to 12. So, from having 2 out of 2 beginning of the season, they went into the international or into the URC sort of break, 3 from 5. And then there you kind of reasonably positioned. However, I think the big game, and a bit of a concern, started really at that Bulls-Lions game, where a Lions team that had been underperforming all season put them to the hammer, to be honest. And that, as a result, has them actually currently sitting at 8th in the URC table, tied with the Lions, but on points difference, but 3 from 6. Which is not awful. It's a slow start, but it's not awful. However, we've then had 2 weekends of Champions Cup rugby, and this is now where the big issues are becoming. And I mean, last week, their defense was atrocious against Bordeaux. They should have probably beaten Bordeaux, to be honest, if they defended well. And then they took a rotated side up to the UK and got smashed by Northampton, 50 points to 5. Now, for Bulls fans, that's unacceptable. I mean, they still, if they win the next 2 games, could qualify for the next round of the Champions Cup. But it kind of looks like, well, the Champions Cup's kind of gone, basically, already. And I think, we keep waiting for a South African side that can go all the way in the Champions Cup. Right now, all our sort of money's on the Stormers. But the Sharks played very well this past weekend, got a result under JB Peterson. But the Bulls, for me, is always sort of the side that you kind of expect to be able to compete, because you look at the depth that they've got. And the amount of Springboks they've got, and I think it's them. They've got a phenomenal squad. they've added to it as well. Good additions, a fly half and Andre Pollard, but he's hardly played. And Serfontaine, season-ending injury. That's a disaster for them. But they brought in the right types of players in the right sort of positions. But these are the results that are worth worrying about. And, Johan Ackermann spoke about the fact that there's a process and they have to look after the players. And I think he's very right about that with regards to the rotation policies, for example, that you can't just play players week in, week out. But at the same time, the question marks are, well, we're not getting results. We're not seeing our best players. Why do we have some of these players? When are we going to start seeing the Johan Ackermann imprint on the side? Now, they've got a couple of very important games coming up, and it's amazing how quickly things can change. Sharks on Saturday, this week Saturday, is a big opportunity for them to turn things around. They basically have 2 games left in the year. They have Sharks away, which I think they can win, and they've got Stormers at home. If they win those 2 games, that means they'll go into the new year, from a URC point of view, with 5 out of 8. Now, that's not bad. It's not phenomenal. It's not bad. But that should put them up sort of 4th and 6th. And then, if we look at what's to come, Stormers away on the 3rd of January, and then 2 big games. Bristol at home and Powerway in the Champions Cup. If they want to do anything in the Champions Cup, they have to make sure they choose their best possible sides over here. But this second half of the season is an interesting time for South African sides, because if they can give their Springboks rest, and if they can give them the time off that they need, and they have to sort of the mandatory stand-down periods, and they can manage it, this is now where, for example, some of the other teams get weakened. Sort of Six Nations blocks, a lot of international players in and out of sides. This is where I think the South African sides really should be trying to take advantage of that situation, where they can play their best players, week in, week out. They can really target some of these games. And I think that presents a big opportunity for the Bulls, who have got plenty. I mean, they've got 5 games in January. If you look at the moment, they've got 7 games between now and the end of January, and we're already mid-December. It's a lot of rugby to be played, and I think there's opportunities for them to go on a bit of a run. And they've got plenty of home games coming up. They go away at Edinburgh Lions, which is down the road, but then they've got Sharks home, Cardiff home, Munster home. They go away for Dragon Scarlets, and they finish with Zebra and Benton. So they've got a very good run in. They've got 4 Welsh sides, 2 Welsh sides, 2 Italian sides, but 4 very winnable games is what I'm getting at to end the URC season. So I don't think there's room to panic just yet, but it's crunch time, really, already for Johan Ackermann, who's starting to feel the pressure. And maybe it's not entirely fair on him, and I think it does speak to the fact that there needs to be more structural changes within the Bulls themselves. But if you're a Bulls fan, I don't think the word is panic just yet, but there are definitely a lot of red flags and a lot of cause for concern, and yesterday's heavy loss against Northampton would have been one of them. But can they come back? Where do they stand? What is going to go on with this Bulls side? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.